This is a novel about Morty Kukenmoos. Morty is actually the narrator of this book, and it takes place during his years as a graduate student at Life of the Mind University. Chapter 1. There's nothing that can throw you off your study plan faster than a murder on campus. Even if the person murdered is someone you wouldn't mind never having to lay eyes on again in this world or the next. It's unsettling, though. You would rather that some other means, short of actual violence, be found to remove said person from the leafy quads and let you get on with it. Just being a graduate student is hard enough on the psyche without people being strangled around you. Even before the murder, I was usually on edge, usually on account of not having understood Horace. This was a number of years ago, and even though today I'm afraid I don't understand Horace any better than I did then, the passage of time has had a pacifying effect on my memories of the whole episode, and I think I should be able to reflect on it with enough equanimity to jot down some notes. At the time, however, it was more than a little disconcerting, especially combined with the dance lessons. But I'm getting ahead of my story. Let me go back to the beginning. I was having a typical conversation with my friend and classmate, Wilbur Michalchuk, which is to say that he was railing on and on about an outrage he discovered in one of those obscure philological journals he liked to read. And I was quietly nodding and sipping from my tankard and throwing an occasional really or I see into the pot, when he dropped his little bombshell. We were at our regular spot in the cavernous postgraduate lounge of Ben's Fairview Tap, a dusky corner table with the slogan E equals M&M squared etched into its ancient wooden surface, and had just begun to do damage to our pitcher of Ben's cheapest brew. I was in one of my touchy moods, having just spent all afternoon at the library wrestling with the odes of Horace, so I can't say I was following every little twist and turn in Mashy's argument. If you've never wrestled with Horace, and I certainly wouldn't recommend you try, you may not know that he's one of the fiercest of the Latin poet crushers, and that it can be a serious risk to your well-being to take him on at any time, much less when your mind is already preoccupied with something else, as mine at the time happened to be. My something else was a terrific graduate student in our class named Sunny Lee, and for several consecutive school terms, her numerous feminine charms had been busily tearing away at my heartstrings, making it much too easy for Horace to get the better of me. For reasons I didn't then fully grasp, I had never been able to make it to first base with Sunny Lee. I had, of course, come to fully expect that I'd be thrown out at second if ever I should attempt to get that far. But she had by now pretty much convinced me that I was never to be offered the opportunity. In compensation for my string of whiffs with her, I'd taken to engaging in flights of fantasy about finally connecting with a ball, and I was just in the process of imagining myself steaming past third when something Mashy said stopped my home run sprint in its tracks. It seemed an impossibility, yet there was a distinct suggestion tucked into his rant that he was about to withdraw from his philological studies in order to enroll in business school. Thinking I might have misheard, I asked him to repeat. "You weren't listening to me again, were you, Magister Guggenmoos?" he reprimanded me, his tone conveying a definite lack of appreciation for the fact that of all the people at Life of the Mind University, or LATMU as we called it, I was probably the one who was forced to listen to him most. "Talking to you," he continued, "is so often like talking to a clay crock, but less satisfying. I said philology has lost its luster for me. I'm leaving it, and the best of riddance to it. I must tell you that there are sinister goings-on around here that have persuaded me to reconsider my options." "I was listening," I said defensively, if not entirely accurately. "I just didn't understand why you'd want to quit." "Morton, as you know, this is a dark place. You have your choice of professors. They're either dim or corrupt. I don't especially mind the dim ones. Those you can ignore. It's the corrupt ones who are bothersome. One need not be a philologist to be virtuous. In fact, quite the contrary. So I will take myself off to some place where the atmosphere is a little more pure. I was bemused. Business school, you mean? Now, I must tell you that Mashi Michalchuk was by far the brainiest and the most advanced of the graduate students in our fourth-year philology class. He certainly looked the part, what with hair sprouting from an oversized head propped on a roddish body, like a golf club stood on end with a yellowing divot stuck to its face. So you may appreciate the difficulty I had imagining him slipping into a sharkskin suit and a pair of Gucci's and oiling himself across a boardroom floor. Moreover, he was the recipient of the fabulous Bulge-Pont Dissertation Fellowship, which meant that, if he would only stick around to reap its generous rewards, he would be awash in funds while he wrote the doctoral thesis on Cicero that he had recently embarked upon. What I didn't understand was why a person with that kind of coin accumulating in his pockets might need a course to tell him how to make it. But there it was. Admittedly, philology could be something of a drag. Academic torture is a phrase that had occasionally passed my lips. And I could honestly see why a normal person might want to avoid it, like something dropped on the sidewalk by a passing schnauzer. But Mashi was not your normal person. He spoke ancient Greek so fluently that one might have guessed he had been raised at the feet of Homer. And his Latin was undoubtedly as rich as Julius Caesar's was when he was slaying Gauls and boiling them up for dinner. This was a man for whom Latin and Greek philology had been tailor-made, and here he was talking about casting it off as if it were just another of his holy t-shirts. Mashi, I protested. Give me a break. You've got the Bulge-Pont. Really, what more could you want? Actually, it wasn't his future I was concerned about, but rather my own. I'd come to rely on his advice whenever I'd had a philological question that needed an answer, and that for one reason or another, I didn't want to put directly to my professors. If he jumped ship, I had serious doubt that I'd be able to navigate the choppy waters of Latmu by myself without running aground on one of those dangerous shoals that Latin was constantly throwing up at you. My immediate predicament was that I had, in an unguarded moment earlier in the term, committed myself to deliver a paper on Horace at the annual Regional Graduate Student Latin Conference that was scheduled to be held at Latmu, now only 2 weeks hence. And I was as yet unclear how I'd be able to stand up there and get through it without putting the Guggenmuth family name into seriously bad odor. He poured himself another glassful of the swill and struck a superior pose. Oh, come now, Magister Guggenmuth. The Bulge-Pont holds no interest for me, and I dare say it shouldn't for you either. Let me enlighten you as to why they have these fellowships. It's exclusively so they'll have warm bodies to fill the seats for their abominable lectures. They've been reduced to bribing people so the halls of so-called learning won't be a vast void. He took a sip from his mug. No, Morton, philology is out. Entrepreneurship is in. I challenge you to come up with a single good reason why a person of even minimal intelligence, such as yourself, should want to remain in this den of philological iniquity when he could otherwise be completing mergers and building monopolies and so on in some shining corporate enterprise. This was a decided departure for Mashi, even granting his various eccentricities, and I really couldn't think what had come over him. Look, I said, there must be 100 reasons for you to stay in philology, not the least of which is that you're so ridiculously good at it. He shook his head. No, Morton, that won't do. There's no philosophically sound justification I'm aware of for persisting in doing something just because you're ridiculously good at it. For example, perhaps you are ridiculously good at eviscerating deans or other minor university officials. That doesn't mean you should continue to do it, does it? Or maybe that's a poor example. Okay, I said, but there are other reasons, and if I give you a really good one, then by your own logic, you'll have to stay, right? He squinted at me as a man might at a $20 bill he'd just been handed, bearing a portrait of President M. Mouse. On whose definition of good, I must ask? Mine, or, heaven forfend, yours? Well, I said, I gather that it would have to be your definition. An admirable answer. I congratulate you, Magister Kugelmus. If I do say so, my definition would be an eminently safe one for this purpose. For any purpose, actually. And in that case, certainly, he said, stroking his scruffy beard, provided that the reason for remaining here is good enough to outweigh all the unassailable reasons for leaving. Fire away, at your pleasure. But of course, I wasn't able to think of anything on the spot likely to pass muster. To be perfectly frank, the Department of Pontifical and Pathological Philology at Lotmu was no Garden of Eden. The more I thought about the impossibly difficult exams, the soporific lectures, the impenetrable texts, the dreary environs, and the sadistic professors, the more I felt Massey might have had a pretty strong case. Maybe I should have been considering going over the hill to the B school myself. And yet, I lacked his confidence that I could just up and walk away from the Department of P and PP without getting myself into an even more of a mess than I was already in. Philology, unfortunately, didn't prepare one for much else in life besides philology. It was just one of the pernicious effects of dipping into the field without a lifeline tied securely to the outside world. And since I didn't have one, I knew it would be foolhardy to lose sight of my immediate objective, which was, at the very least, to come out of the impending Regional Graduate Student Latin Conference with my vital organs intact and my head still firmly attached to my shoulders.